Okay, welcome everyone to the Alliance of Angels webinar. We are going to be talking about setting up HR, getting it right from the earliest stage. And today we're privileged to have one of the most experienced HR professionals in the startup community, Shannon Swift, to share her guidance and wisdom with us. Some logistics before we get started. We'll appreciate it if you are not speaking. We ask that you put yourself on mute, right, so that we have a good learning experience for everyone. But that said, we want to keep this interactive too. So if you have a burning question, you want to jump in, you want to participate, please feel free to do that and at any point of the session. Right. So I'm going to say a few words and start off by sharing a bit about my organization. So my name is Jane. I run Alliance of Angels. It's an angel investing group here in Seattle. There's 140 angel investors in my organization. Every year we put about 10 million into 20 companies. Right. Most companies that are fundraising from us, they're looking for a total of between $500,000 and 1.5. And our typical check size is 250 to 500. Right? Sector-wise, we're about a half IT, a quarter consumer. The rest is life sciences, hardware, energy, etc. But that's it. We are a sector agnostic investor, also a stage agnostic investor. If my only hard filter is that we only invest in companies that are headquartered in the Pacific Northwest. Right. So if you are interested in seeking funding from us, my email's down there, or maybe someone listening in is an angel investor or maybe interested in angel investing, feel free to reach out to me too. All right, and with that, I am going to stop talking and I'm going to hand the session over to Shannon. Let me stop sharing as well. All right, Shannon, over to you.
All right, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Let's see. Eugene, I'm seeing your slide. Can everybody see me?
I'm seeing your slide.
Okay, can you see me at all?
Let me see.
I don't think
I can see you. I can see you.
Okay, I can't see anybody else. So we'll just go with this here. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. Yes, so please do chime in as we go along. I prefer this to be very interactive. So it's my honor to be here today. I see Mr. Dan Rosen. Good to see you, Dan. Okay, so in the beginning, so my background, I am an early stage, I call myself a startup junkie. So for 30 years, I have been in early stage growth companies. My first company that I was with was a healthcare home infusion therapy company. I was employee number 8. We grew to 110. I grew with a company from 12 to 150. I had the honor of serving as Zillow's first VP of HR through my company, growing the organization from 2 to 140 employees. That's definitely the stage that I like. And when it gets to 150, I discovered early in my career that I developed an eye twitch, and it's time for me to get out and go back to the startup world. So, so this is definitely a space I love. Most of my career has been spent with early stage technology startups, venture backed. And I started Swift HR Solutions in 2004, and we offer fractional VP of HR services, talent. So we have recruiters that look and feel like part of their client group. We also have a leadership team, and we have a new manager development workshop coming up on July 16th. And if you'd like to attend, I'll have contact information at the end, and I'll give you a discount code for that. It's fantastic. It's virtual. It's 90 minutes. If you have anybody that is newly or nearly promoted to a manager, I highly recommend it. So that's a little bit about me. And Swift HR Solutions has grown now. We are 40 folks. Most of those are on the HR and leadership side, and we have 6 on the talent side as well. So what I'm going to talk about today is really a lot of the lessons that I've seen throughout my career working with, gosh, we've worked with over 500 early stage companies now. And so my goal is to help prevent you from having some of the HR mistakes that we have seen others have. So the first, I'm going to tell you some stories. I love stories. So the first one is, the first mistake is not talking about your culture early on. So being able to really define who you are as an organization, and especially with the initial founders, is really critical. I'll tell you a bit of horror stories here before we get into the how to not have these things happen to you. So it was a company that had 2 founders that had worked together. They had left Microsoft and they'd worked together together there really well. And so they thought they would start a business. They got venture funding. They did not talk at all about who they were as an organization or as individuals. And so what happened was they were about a year into the business. They'd had funding, they were growing. And we had this situation happen where a decision around benefits came up. And it became really glaringly apparent that one of the founders was very conservative and the other one was very liberal. And it sounds like a really innocuous situation, but it ended up really, excuse me, really exposed the huge divide that they had in how they viewed people practices and how they wanted to grow their organization. And the investors pulled the funding. The employees kind of lined up behind one or the other founder, the funding was pulled and the company was gone overnight. And if they would have really sat and talked through some of those things early on, they would have avoided that outcome. So, so really encourage very early on talking about culture. The other one is hiring without a plan. So not having a process, opportunistic hires. So you know somebody that you worked with that was fantastic. They may or may not be a fit for what you're doing now, but it's just you jump on that because you don't really have a well thought out plan about who you need on the team and what that what the skill sets are. Overselling the role. So really trying to entice somebody to come and creating a vision for them that is not going to be reality when they join. And then not recognizing that somebody coming out of a large organization where they were successful had a whole lot of resources at their disposal that helped make them successful. And that may not translate to a startup where they're going to have very few resources. They're going to have to kind of roll up their sleeves and get everything done themselves. Another one is inflated titles. I recently spoke with a founder who was hiring her first team. There were 3 folks that she was bringing on. She had a pretty young junior team, and she was trying to decide if she should give a VP title or a C title. And once you have given a VP or a C title, there's really nowhere else to go. And most likely, the person that is going to be the early employee is not going to be the long-term executive. And so, so really encourage starting conservatively and being able to add later. A word that you're going to hear me use a lot today is intentional, and you really want to like think out over a longer term period. So don't start right out the gate with everybody with a C title. The other is inflated compensation. Another entrepreneur that I spoke with was getting ready to make his first hire. He had closed his funding and he said, "Shannon, I'm hiring my first engineer." And I said, "Great. What are you going to pay him?" And he said, "I'm going to pay him $300,000. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, he's coming from Google and that's what it's going to take to get him. That's what his comp package there is." And so I said, "Okay, let's just stop and talk about this for a minute. Is he going to be your VP or your CTO down the road?" And he said, "No, I'm going to have to hire that." And I said, "Okay, what's that guy going to be making, or that girl?" And so, so that was a near huge mistake. So what we did was we sat back and said, okay, what's a reasonable salary that we can build around with the rest of the team? And then how can we build in some milestones that will allow him to achieve that 300,000 over the course of the year, if we have certain things happen, but we're not breaking the compensation model right out of the gate. So, so really thinking that through. And then another one is just giving too much too early. So I have very generous entrepreneurs that want to start out by giving everybody 100% of their benefits coverage, including dependents. And they want to start out with a 401k and they want to start out with everything. So really, I've seen you can only go backwards, right? So if you give everybody everything up front, there's nothing to give in year 1 or year 2 or year 3. So giving too much too early results in takeaways later when you can't afford it, and it becomes apparent that it's not going to support the business needs. So being a little conservative. So those are the early mistakes that I see and the things that we want to try to avoid. We're going to talk about next. Okay, so again, laying an intentional foundation. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So the first one, I am a huge culture and values person, and I love coming in and really defining who we are. There's no wrong or right. It's just what's wrong or right for us. And so, so I encourage having those conversations early. You will hit bumps in the road as a startup, and you want people to band together and push through those obstacles and overcome them, versus hitting a bump in the road and flying out of the vehicle and running off to another company. So the best way to do that is to make sure that you have a common foundation as a team. And so I really like to institutionalize, so defining them, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I want to talk about institutionalizing them. That means that you're building them into everything that happens within the organization. It's everything that touches the team. It's how we make decisions. It's how we resolve conflict. And again, there's no wrong or right, but just pick who you are and who you aren't as an organization, and then be true to that going forward. Basic compatibility really is the basis for commitment. So if everybody has that shared place that they're coming from, it's going to really create a foundation that will carry you through. So defining the values. So there are a couple of different ways that that I have done this over the years. So a really simple, quick way to do it is just to sit back and get around a table, however many people we have, talk about the traits of the favorite person you ever worked with. And what was it about that person that made you love working with them? As you compile that list, you'll see some trends coming through that likely will help you to form that initial framework of who you are. And so that's a very quick, easy way to pull out some of those common threads. Another way to do it, which is a more comprehensive process that I've done over the years with my clients, is having a 12-question culture interview. So interviewing every employee, and I like to do it just one-on-one. It's great if you can do this before, like around 20 employees, if you can do 20 and under. Being able to ask everybody questions like, why did you choose to be here? How do you describe how we treat one another? You are at a family or a friend function, and somebody says, hey, what's it like working at that company? It's the words that come out of your mouth describing that company. And then you talk about, it's a year from now, what's changed for either the good or the bad. And that gives you a sense of what people care about and what they worry about losing that you want to intentionally hold on to as you go forward. So having that question. Then I have a founder questionnaire that talks about what the founder is all about. What is your desired outcome from all of this? What are the traits that you look for when you're hiring somebody? What are the traits that you absolutely want to keep out of the organization? So we have some questions for the founders. And then compiling all of that and pulling out those common themes. So what are the words that you hear repeated over and over and over again? And then it helps to have a meaningful acronym just to make them memorable. I'll share mine. It's SWIFT. I'm married really well, so I've got a great foundation to work from. The SWIFT for us, this S is service, the W is win-win, the I is integrity, the F is fun, and the T is trusted advisor. And our team can easily articulate those because of that acronym. It makes it very easy for us to remember and to carry it through every single thing that we do. So group ownership is really important. So once you've defined your values, it's getting the whole organization around those and having them help you refine them. And so once we've got our words, it's like, what does integrity mean to us? And let people fill that in. So integrity for us means that our words match our actions. We're predictable. People, our clients know what to expect from us in a situation. What does fun mean? Fun means different things for different people. So having the team participate in that exercise will really help to create that sense of ownership, and people will be fiercely protective. And that's what you want. That's the strongest organizations I see, are people are fiercely protective of the values and keeping the team it's going to carry that through. All right, and you guys holler if anybody has any questions or wants to stop along the way. So recruitment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about strategic human capital planning. So there are 3 areas that I like to focus on very early on that can carry you through and really ensure a smooth path forward. The first one is around recruiting, and it's talking about philosophies. So what are our philosophies around recruiting? So one these are ones from my career, and you can come up with your own, but you're free to plagiarize these. For me, recruiting is a really important one. And again, primarily technology startups, people have equity. Everybody benefits when the company does well. And so recruiting needs to be everyone's job. So what that looks like is that you have people that are involved in recruiting. Who are the people that I worked with in the past that we really need to have here? Everyone will be involved in interview loops and being able to really help sell the company to candidates that we want to have, as well as determine if somebody's a good fit for us. So recruiting, everyone will have an opportunity to participate in the recruiting process. Hire for the long term. This stage is not going to stay at this stage. And so we want people that are going to be able to adapt to change. If the market changes and we have to pivot, that they're going to be able to pivot with us. We want to hire for that long-term resiliency. And then hire for the whole. So you're hiring not just for your own department or your own role that you're trying to hire. You're really thinking about the whole organization and what's going to make sense for the organization with regard to this candidate. So think about the whole company. You're small. It's not departmentalized yet. That's what I love. Small companies. It's like we're one unit. And then when in doubt, don't hire. This is probably the most important philosophy here. If you feel like you have to talk yourself into a candidate, or you just have this niggling concern that you can't overcome, definitely try to validate it with some data. But listen to that. And if you're questioning, when in doubt, don't hire. We all have had that person that we had to sit by for 12 hours a day and just made us miserable because it was so obvious that they were not a fit for the organization. So that's much worse than not filling the position. So just make it a expectation that you're not going to hire if you have questions. And then the one that we're super excited about right now is really an early focus on team diversity. And right out of the gate, planning, and again, I'm going to come back to intentionality. What do you want this team to look like? The most successful teams, has been proven over and over, are those that have a diverse set of folks. So gender, age, race, backgrounds. So really having an intentionality around that right out of the gate and creating some goals for yourself around that. More and more as I talk to entrepreneurs, I hear a very specific intention around they want to have a certain percentage of women on their team. They want to have a certain diversity around race. And so having that right out of the gate is fantastic. And then the next strategic human capital planning that we're going to talk about is compensation. And this one is really a place where I see a huge opportunity to lay a foundation that carries the organization forward, or in the example I gave at the beginning around somebody that was about to make a huge mistake early on that was going to create a structure that just wasn't going to have integrity. And so the first thing is really thinking through your philosophies. So where do we want to position ourselves relative to market? Do we want to be at market? Do we want to be below market? And we're going to make it up with equity. That was Microsoft's position for many, many years, probably a couple of decades. They intentionally were a percentage below market, and then they made up for it with equity. And then as the company developed and matured and the equity wasn't providing that same value, then they had to switch over and start raising salaries up, and the equity was less of a portion of that. So think about that. How do you want to position yourself? Do you want to and be candid with candidates about it? Someone will always be willing to pay more. And so I almost like to do like a reverse psychology to say, listen, if money's your biggest driver, don't come here. We want you to want the whole package, who you're working with, the type of work you're working on, what the company is all about, the opportunity that we have here, and the opportunity you have to make an impact. Money is definitely a factor, but if it's your primary focus, don't come. And I've had candidates say, no, I'm excited about the company. And then now we can talk and get to a reasonable place for an offer. And then think about just the compensation mix. So you have different aspects to your compensation that you can play with. And so what I love to do is think about, okay, we've got our base salary, obviously. We have equity, typically, if we're an early stage venture funded company or angel funded company. And what's the mix of that long term and short term? So coming up with a pro forma early on. So, and I will just say at Zillow with 2 people, we mapped out the positions that we intended to hire over the first year. And then we built out some ranges so that we had some guardrails. And so what that means is If somebody came and had worked with the founder before and said, oh, I made so much money with my equity, I don't even care about cash, I just want equity, that it's a different type of compensation, and over time that's going to create some issues if you just pay somebody. I mean, you can't pay them, you have to at least pay them minimum wage. So so what I like to do is have some hiring ranges for base salary and then also for equity. And so if somebody comes in and doesn't care about the salary, they just want equity, we can say, okay, you're going to have the lowest salary for this position and we'll give you the highest equity. And conversely, if they say, I care about equity, but I have, I've got kids in college and I need to make a certain amount of money, then it's like, okay, let's go higher on the base salary, lower on the equity. And you've got some guardrails. So over time, your system makes sense. It has integrity to it. So I really encourage having those. If you have a total rock star that can just step in on day one and just hit the ground running and add value immediately, you might want to go to the top of the range for both. And conversely, if you have somebody that's more junior but has a ton of potential, you think you can start them at the bottom of each of those. But you're just giving yourself some guardrails. So integrity and consistency are so important. Just assume that people are going to share their compensation with one another. And if the compensation were to print off and somebody saw it on a printer, or if somebody saw the spreadsheet online, that they would look at it and say, this makes sense. And so you want to make sure that that you've got integrity to the decisions that you're making around compensation. This is probably the most emotional side of HR, is the compensation side. And then the last thing that I'll point out on this, on thinking through your philosophy around compensation, is recognizing that internal equity at the early stage is more important than external. So it doesn't really matter what Google and Facebook and Microsoft are paying. It matters what we're able to provide our team. And we want to make sure that relative to each other, again, that it makes sense, that all of our positions, we've kind of mapped out our positions, and that where we're paying people relative to one another has integrity to it. So more of a focus. We want to get market data, but market data is all over the place. It's incredibly dynamic, especially right now. And so really that heavy focus on that internal equity will be important. So that's the compensation side. And then the last, strategic human capital planning, isn't moving. There we go. Whoops. Is benefits. So what is your philosophy around benefits? And again, thinking about this really early with intention is going to be really beneficial to you in the long term. So what I want to do is look at my demographics. Who am I going to be hiring initially? And then who do I need to attract and retain? And so I was with a company, a software company that started in Australia. And so they immediately looked at US benefits and said, wow, this is not at all as strong as it should be. So we just right out of the gate said, we're going to be highly competitive with regard to benefits. We're going to pay better than market. And that same company, we also decided we were going to be at market for salaries. We had equity, we had market salaries, and then we had very strong benefits. So we were going to attract folks that had families, that had maybe single income, a spouse stayed at home, and so we wanted to make sure that we were consistent with that. So HR folks have lots of access to benefit survey data, and it's really easy to see how we want to position ourselves. Just thumbnail to keep in mind, I usually will want to at market, will want to budget about 20% of salaries, and so that will have a very strong, competitive, comprehensive program. If I want to be a little richer than that, I'll go to maybe 21.5%, 22%. If I have a group that is all in their 20s, nobody cares about the doctor, we just need to have a plan in place that will just make do, then I might look at 17 or 18% of salaries. And so working from that budget perspective is really helpful in terms of looking at what you're able to offer. And so, and then again, being we want to be conservative. It's easier to give than to take away. So we've already talked about that. So starting out with paying for your employees, and then you have to decide again, based on your demographic, if you want to pay for anything for dependents out of the gate. Year one, start conservative. Year two, you might add long-term disability. You might add dependent coverage at a certain percent. You might put in a basic 401k plan, but not a match yet. So just think through like a 1, 2, 3 year plan. And then, you know, surveying every year. Benefits is dynamic. It's going to change. I had one client that started out, everybody was single. And so we put a pretty basic plan in place. The next year, as we surveyed the team and kind of looked at our team, several folks had gotten married. And so now they cared a little bit more about dependents. And then the next year, when we surveyed again, we started to have babies. And so, so that really made us focus on adding benefits that would support that new demographic. So every year, really thinking about what do people care about and being able to adapt to that. Again, if you start with 100% of everything, you have nowhere to go. So start conservative. Okay, so we're going to add to the team now. So just taking an organizational recruitment approach. So one of the philosophies that I mentioned already is that I think recruiting should be everyone's job. So, so doing a headcount forecast and pro forma is really helpful. So just thumbnail, it's so hard. There are so many unknowns. You don't know what's going to happen 6 months from now, maybe even 3 months or a month from now. But trying to just do some kind of a straw man pro forma where you can list out the positions that we think that we're going to need. And then really be able to be strategic about it. So letting the team know what we're going to be needing. They can be thinking about those referrals that they folks that they've worked with that they would want to have come in. And then going back again to recruiting is everyone's job, sourcing, selling, selecting. When I started with the software company in Bellevue as employee number 12, it was right after our Series A funding had closed. And we had a lot of recruiting that we needed to do, and nobody knew who we were. And so I actually took out a little ad, and we threw a party. And I got some publicity. John Cook was with a different publication than GeekWire. GeekWire wasn't around yet. And so he said, hey, it looks like you're throwing a recruiting party. Can I come? And so we ended up getting a great write-up. But what I did was I went to the team, and we were 18 people at that point. And I said, okay, I want everybody here from 4 to 7 p.m. Wear your logo shirt. We had a foosball table. That was a big part of our culture. And so we had a couple of people manning the foosball table. We had a couple of people giving demos. We had some very light refreshments. We were very scrappy. And we had people at the door that were getting that gut level reaction about from candidates. The managers were available to just jump into offices and do 5-minute interviews. So we literally involved the entire organization in that effort. And we had 3 direct hires, and then we had 2 indirect hires that happened shortly after from people that had heard about it or read about it. So so really think about getting your entire team involved in the recruiting effort. 3 reasons everyone should care about recruitment. So the first one is obvious. So we need to have the position, we need the people, the resources to do the work. The second one is that it's a huge time crunch. And so you can completely spend, most of your work week, sourcing, screening, looking at candidates, interviewing. And if you don't have the outcomes that you want, if it wasn't efficient, you've just wasted a ton of precious time. And so, what we want to do is make sure that everybody understands the process, and that we're really utilizing everyone's time efficiently. And then the third reason is often overlooked. This is your employment brand. So as we start up, people don't know us. We might have some known founders. We may not. And so every interaction with a candidate is really important. So we want, again, back to that intention word, we want every interaction to be very intentional. What are the words coming out of a candidate's mouth after they've spent time with us? And are they the words that we want to have coming out of their mouth? Or are they saying, gosh, I've heard this, I gave this company a day of my life interviewing, and they never even called me back. I guess I didn't get the job. And so that's not what we want to have happen. So differentiate yourself by being very efficient, very intentional about that candidate experience. Even if the candidate isn't a fit for us, they often will know somebody that is. And throughout my career, I've often had candidates that have given me the right candidate when we told them that they weren't quite the fit for us right then. So and then let's see. So fit, values and culture, and this over time, I think I've actually even shifted this a little bit to think that values and culture are maybe a little more important So the technical side is definitely important, but values and culture is what's really going to create that long-term success. So so make sure that you have people that are interviewing for both of those. You've got somebody focusing on culture, you've got somebody focusing on that technical fit. Having cross-functional interview loops really ensures success for the new employee. If they have met people from around the organization and everybody's given them a thumbs up, everyone that was on that interview loop is going to be invested in their success and will want them to be successful. And so so having cross-functional interview loops is really helpful at the earliest stage. And then and yeah, so total consensus. So setting people up for success. So that's recruiting. We have any questions at all yet? All right, so we're going to jump in. So stage appropriate and culturally aligned HR. So this is kind of my passion. This is actually our tagline. So I often will talk with an early stage company, and we'll talk about their employee guide or their employee handbook. And they're like, "Oh yeah, we have a handbook." And I say, "How long is it?" And they're like, "Oh, it's 35 pages. You know, we took it from my last company." And more often than not, we will say, just throw it out. Just, you don't need a 35-page employee handbook. There actually is no legal reason to have a handbook. Oh, please, question. Saurabh?
Sorry, Shannon, I was trying to answer the question in the Q&A, but there was no way to type it.
Oh, and I'm not seeing chat, so somebody's gonna have to tell me if there's a chat too.
So I apologize to interrupt at this stage. I'll ask to get out of the way, and then you can answer separately. Okay. or offline. But you know, I guess guilty as charged, being a tech company, we're very focused on data and privacy when it comes to our team. Are you able to talk about platforms that would be like ideal for startups? Like, I don't know, like Culture Amp or Virgin Pulse, or does ADP have something? Just something that really allows for that data flowing back to know how teams are doing, especially around fit and motivation. Is there anything you can say, or maybe handle offline, however you?
Yeah, so you're looking for an opportunity for, are you talking about feedback from the employees?
Yes,
like,
so,
okay.
So you know, we go through all this hard work, as you said, to try to get the right people, and you know, 3 to 9 months out, you figure it out. It happens, right? People leave, or you push people out. I guess I'm asking about the data that could help us get to those decisions or realizations sooner, and in a more private way, where things can just be a little bit more objective than having to have those really difficult conversations with somebody of like, I don't know how to tell you this, but like, you really need to find another job.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much a relationship person, and that's why I love small companies. I think that's probably why I develop an iTwitch at 150, is because you kind of get beyond that, the ability to have those one-on-one conversations. So I am a big proponent of constant communication. So one-on-one is much more effective than a big major event performance review. And so I think the first thing is making sure that the manager is having candid, open conversations and two-way conversations with their team. And whatever amount of frequency makes sense for you. Some teams have weekly, sometimes there are daily check-ins. And then others are maybe, you know, they're all working pretty independently, and so maybe it's just once a month. But having the employee have an opportunity to talk about anything they want to bring up, the manager can bring it up, and then it's real time. You're not having to deliver some big surprise message. And so I think, I mean, there are ways for employees, I mean, you know, Tiny Pulse, there are different tools that you can definitely use to get employee feedback. But I think the first step is really that manager relationship and making sure that the conversation is flowing, and not saving up things to talk about them. Talk about things in real time. Then it becomes just a continuum. It's like, here's what's going great. Here's where it's maybe not going so great. And most often, if it's not working for you or the manager, it's not working for the team member either. And so getting that out in the open and really understanding, you know, what their motivation is and what, you know, what kind of recognition they like. You know, do they like to be publicly recognized? Do they like it in private? Just really understanding your team and having that ongoing dialogue is absolutely the most effective way to know where somebody is, what they're thinking, before they walk out the door. And then if you do have somebody that slips out the door, it's following up with them and just saying, what could we have done differently to make this an environment that worked for you? And if it's not a culture fit, then that's great. I mean, I had a situation one time, we were in a rapid growth. We hired like 50 people in one quarter. And we had a QA engineer that slipped in that was not a culture fit. And it was obvious right away to everybody. And he came into my office just before his 3-month anniversary. It wasn't performance stuff. It was just like, what he cared about, nobody else in the company cared about. And so he came into my office and he said, I'm leaving and I need to tell you why. Everybody is so nice, but I just don't belong here. And I said, I know. And I said, I'm sorry that we brought you into a place where you weren't, you weren't able to bring your whole self and be here. And so that was actually not, it was a failure, but it was actually a great indicator of a successful culture, right? That he basically was ejected like a virus. Jim Collins from Good to Great wrote, or I heard him speak one time, and he talked about working at HP, and he was not the team collaborative. Sit in a pool of people. He wanted his own office with a door shut, and he's a lone wolf, and he was ejected like a virus. And so if that happens, that's not a bad thing. That's actually validation that you're doing some really good stuff. But I think that ongoing conversation is really my recommendation over any tool. How big is your team?
We are, I mean, I'm asking for myself and also for our partners.
Okay.
We are just starting to grow. So we have historically been between 5 to 8.
Okay.
But as we're starting to grow, and the reason I'm mainly asking and why we're looking at tools is because our team will grow in very different geographic spaces.
Yep.
Right. We are going to have team members in Asia.
More and more the norm. Yeah.
More than we'll have here very soon. So that's why I was asking.
Yeah, and then you have even different cultures, and so how you're communicating, making sure that people are really able to be candid and open. So yeah, so we can definitely take this offline and talk about some specific tools. But I'll just say, I mean, I think that one-on-one communication is the very best way.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay, so back to employee guide versus handbook. Typically 3 to 4 to 5 pages. Seattle has added a bunch of specific things and that we have to put in, but typically 4 or 5 pages for an employee guide. There's no legal reason to have a handbook. There are some things that legally we need to communicate to employees. So employment at will, safety, harassment, those types of things. But it can be done in a very simplistic guide fashion that covers everything we need to about time off. We proactively can address things like, parental leave and jury duty and bereavement, and have it be a very, very short, practical document that people actually read. And then orientation. So one of the best ways that you can ensure a successful venture going forward once you've got this culturally aligned person coming on board is to make sure that they get a really robust start to their experience. And so there's stuff like benefits and the employee guide and all of that we have to cover, but there's also a whole lot more that we can fill in. So what does everyone need to know to be successful in your environment? It might be acronyms, it might be an org chart, it might be watching a demo, it might be listening in on a sales call, but making that list of what are the things that we need to ensure that every single person, no matter what their position is, gets that foundation when they start. So really putting a little bit of time and effort into that. Scalable processes over policies. I am pretty policy averse. When I started with a software company, the CEO said to me on day one, we need a vacation policy. And I said, okay, talk with me about what you mean. And he said, well, Dave just said he's going to take next week off and he didn't give enough notice. So, we should have at least like something like 2 weeks notice if you want to take a week off or a month notice or, whatever. And so I said, well, is it a problem that he's going to take next week off? And he said, no, but it might have been. And I said, okay, well, you could have just told him no, that wasn't enough notice and we needed him here. But so I went back to my desk and I started to try to do what he asked me to do. And I was a little irreverent. And so I ended up writing a memo to the team. And I said, so you want to take time off, ? And I said, here are some guidelines. We're a small team, know that if you don't give much notice, we may not be able to accommodate your request. If you're going to be gone in the summer or holiday time, know that other people are asking, give as much notice, make sure that your stuff is covered. So we just kind of like had guidelines versus a policy, because the first thing that was going to happen if I set a policy that you have to give a month's notice to take a week off, was somebody was going to give 3 weeks notice. It was going to be totally fine, and we just broke it. So really think about when you need to put in those strict policies over processes. And so, and again, it kind of comes back to that culturally aligned. It's like, we don't need to have really heavy-handed processes. When I left Zillow with 140 people, the only policy that we had was our IT policy. We had a lot of scalable processes that carried the company forward, but we didn't have policies. And then just also keep in mind that that some of the best things in the workplace are free and are close to free. So we don't have to do big, super fancy programs. We can do some super fun stuff that doesn't cost a lot of money to keep the team engaged and to go forward. So breaking up. So yes, it will happen. You're going to have those situations where we just didn't hire the right person, or more often, I think it's the earliest team may not be the team that's going to make sense as the company grows and matures. So what do we do? This is a phrase that one of our clients said that I love. It's, people are hired for what they know, and they're fired for who they are. So back to that cultural side again. So we hire people because they know a lot of stuff, but maybe they're not a fit. So I've talked about the best example I think I have for that is that QA engineer that I talked about earlier, and they self-selected out. Focus on the health of the whole team. So if we have somebody that is just definitely not a fit, isn't contributing what they need to contribute, is dragging the rest of the team down, we have to cut that cancer out. We're going to start losing people that we don't want to lose if we don't. And so I know it's really difficult to think about, okay, how do I terminate somebody? And it's a scary thing to do that, but you really need to just kind of rise up and look across and say, I've got to take care of my team. I've got to take care of the whole organization. And so you need to use that as your courage, post or your stake in the sand to make sure that you're doing what the company needs from you. So 4 questions. If I get to a place where we're like, okay, it's time for us to make a change, we really need to get this person out of the organization. The 4 questions are: do they know what's wrong? So have we had that candid conversation? So back to the earlier talk about about how we know how somebody's doing. Do they know what's wrong? Have we had that talk? Do they know what they need to do to fix it? And then do they know what's going to happen if they don't? So that's that final notice. This doesn't have to be a long drawn out process. We can just, hey, it's, your code is not working. Everybody has to rewrite it all the time. And, we need you to stick within our guidelines. And then the next conversation is, okay, we've had this conversation. Still is not meeting the needs of the organization. And if we have to talk about this again, the next conversation is going to be to talk about your exit. And so really you've given them that final notice. And then the 4th question is, have we done everything we can to set this person up to be successful? And so, looking at, are there obstacles that we could remove for them that would help them? Is there additional training or mentoring or something that we can do to help? And if you can answer yes to all of those questions, so they know what's wrong, they know what they need to do to fix it, they knew what was going to happen if they didn't, and we've done everything we can to set them up to be successful. Going forward is typically outside of a public policy issue, like somebody has a discrimination or some protected situation, you are in great shape to go forward. So don't be afraid to really respectfully make a change when it's needed. So the next one is situational. So the punishment should fit the crime. So what I just talked through is a typical performance related type issue. If you have a situation that really warrants immediate action, then what I just said goes out the window. I had a situation where a manager had brought one of their assistants on a business trip. And really advocated for this person to be on the business trip, and it turned out that it was for very personal reasons and not related to the business, and the business trip was almost compromised because of it. And so when the president called me from the airport and told me what had happened, I said, okay, he said, you need to talk me off the wall. And I said, you stay up on that wall, because when you get back, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to let them go. And so that situation was one that was very clearly warranted immediate dismissal. And so really think about, when I think about the decision of actually terminating employment, have we gone through those 4 situations? Does this punishment fit the crime? And then layoffs. So layoffs are a really, really difficult reality of startups. So things don't always go as we intended. We don't always get funding when we think that we're going to close funding. And sometimes we have to reduce people that really are valuable team members, and not situations that we've talked about just previously. And so the biggest advice that I give with regard to this is remember your values. So don't throw your values out the window because things got messy. That's when you really want to think about, like, who are we as an organization? How do we treat people? And these are the people that we have been working with day in and day out, and it's an unfortunate situation, but we need to make sure that we're treating them the same way that we would as they were coming in, as they've been here, and take care of them as they're exiting out. So I had one layoff situation where it was the first time CEO, and he said, okay, so we had this whole layoff thing organized and it was a product release, and the product didn't go well. So it was just really unfortunate. We had to reduce the company from 70 down. We had to lay off 26 people in one day. And so we had choreographed which the managers that were going to take their teams into a room. We had 3 conference rooms, and then they were routed into the big conference room where we had their packets and their transition plan. And then they were going to go back to their desks after everybody had been notified, and they were going to gather up their stuff. And the CEO said, okay, so when they come back to their desk, should we just ignore them and not look at them? And I said, well, why would you do that? And he said, well, it's going to be uncomfortable for them. And I said, no, it's uncomfortable for you because you feel horrible about this situation. But it's, the worst thing that you can do is to ignore them. I said, really what you need to do is walk up, look them in the eye, shake their hand and say, thank you so much for all the contributions that you've made while you're here. We're so sorry that this outcome has happened. What can we do to help you pack up? Like, how can we help? That's the right approach. That fit their culture and their values. And so really making sure that you're being true to who you are as an organization in good times and bad. Okay, so I'm going to leave some time here for questions. So just really quickly wrapping up, be intentional. That's my word of the day, is intentional. Be stage appropriate and true to your values. Don't be afraid to quickly correct mistakes. So if something isn't working, don't be afraid to jump in and early correct. And remember to enjoy the journey. I think this one's really important. It's like, no matter what the outcome, we have to enjoy the journey and be able to look back and say, okay, that was a great ride, whether we had the success that we wanted to or not. Remember to stop and celebrate successes and enjoy that journey. Okay, so I am going to just open up. I'm going to stop sharing and open up. So any questions anybody has? Stories you guys want to share?
I have a question. Can you hear me, Shannon?
I can. Is it Erin?
Great. It is.
Okay,
yeah,
I
so
can see your name.
You have thrown so many amazing concepts and just very practical approach to things. So thank you very much. What my question is actually fairly in the weeds, so hopefully it doesn't get us too far down a rabbit hole, but very refreshing to hear that you advocate for more of an employee guide versus the 40-page handbook. So you breezed real quickly over what some of the things are that you think are critical to have in the guide. Could you bullet point those just so I actually have time to write them down? And then also on the topic of time off, specifically in the Seattle area, is it okay to lump all PTO into one category? We need to
Okay.
Save time, that sort of thing.
Okay, so I think there was a little bit of extra noise there at the end. So you're asking if it's okay to have PTO and lump everything all together?
Correct. So
Okay.
yeah, so
Yep.
in addition to like wanting to know what those key elements are that you recommend having in a guide,
You bet.
specifically when it comes to articulating the PTO piece of it, can you lump it all into one category, or in Seattle and Washington specifically, do we have to have a specific carve out for that paid sick and safe time?
Yeah, it's getting more and more complicated, isn't it? So so I'll tell you, okay, so first of all, your first question around the employee guide and kind of the components of that. So I like to talk about, this is when we're going to get paid. This is what the pay date covers, what time period it covers. Then we talk about time off and whether we have PTO, whether we have things broken out separately. We talk about, whether we're accruing or not. We talk about if somebody leaves the organization, is it paid out? And then we cover additional time off leave. And so other types of leaves that may not fall under that. So we talk about parental leave, we talk about bereavement. And I like to take an approach of, legally this, but employee relations wise or culturally this. And so parental leave is a great one where, it's as an early stage company, you can always do more than what is required. And then, how we want to treat bereavement, how we want to treat jury duty before those things come up, proactively addressing them. And then holidays. And holidays is another one where I like to start conservatively. So maybe with, the standard 6 plus the day after Thanksgiving, so 7 holidays. And then over time, you're able to add. And then you also can do what makes sense in that employee guide. So every year you can look at your holiday schedule and say, okay, the 4th of July falls on a Thursday. So this year we're going to take Friday off as well, but it's just a one-time thing based on what makes sense for that year. So the holidays laid out. And then I'd like to put in really basic information about the benefits that we have. We might have a electronic usage policy or a process. What are the guidelines that we have for our electronic policies? Expenses, how we're going to handle expenses. But they're usually just short paragraphs. It's not, and then we have to have all of the, the military, the USERA, we've got safety, harassment, employment at will, those types of things are covered. And then anything else that's going to be specific to you. So if there's like a technology allowance or, something about remote offices, but typically, again, it's a very short practical document. And with regard to leave, so when the Seattle Sick and Safe Leave came out, our language literally for PTO, we literally just had to add, PTO may also be used for, and we defined safe leave. And so I ran it by the folks that had written the ordinance, and they were like, yep, that's it. Where, a lot of, if you had like a full blown handbook, they were adding like a page and a half. And so, typically at the early stage, we can keep it very, very minimal in terms of what we need to, and it just completely practical. Doesn't make people's heads spin as they're trying to read it and understand it. So, as long as you are allowing, for that time to match whatever the legal requirement is for accruals, like for example, if you have PTO that just that people can accrue and it doesn't blow up at the end of the year, that met the ordinance for the Seattle Sick and Safe Leave. So the fact that you were able to carry it over and just go up to a certain amount. So we're going to cap it at a certain number of hours. So there are ways that you can structure that are going to still fit the need. We do have some additional language now with the new Washington state leave programs and but again, it can just be very practical, very, very short. And we can talk more offline about your specific situation if you want.
Great. No, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Me actually.
Hi, David.
David here.
Yep.
Have you hired on contract, and have you had experience using contractees as a evaluation of their fit to culture?
So yes to contractors. That is one strategy that companies can take. And I think that usually is going to indicate that maybe you don't have as much confidence in your hiring process as you might.
Not right now.
And so that is a way, contractors are useful for short-term engagements, for specific projects. And, so I think that really comes back to that cultural of how do they fit into our organization? At what point do we want to bring them on as a full-time employee? I think, I like to remind folks that we have employment at will, unless you're in Montana. And so, if we do our best job of trying to determine if this is a good fit, and it turns out not to be, employment at will is there. And we have, we've given that to them in their offer letter, we've given it to them in their employee guide. And so we can make a change if we need to change. So I tend to prefer to go all in and say, we're going to, unless there's a short-term need or some ambiguity about the long-term nature of the role, I tend to want to build a team that's going to
Just
be
go in right away. Okay. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Hi, Shannon. My name is Nir. First, thank you for the talk. It was really interesting and, shone light on some angles I did not think about. It was great. I wanted to ask, for a small company like between 1 and 5 employees that cannot afford you, what resources would you recommend?
Well, we're very scrappy and we love startups. So we work with companies from 2 to 150 employees. So it may be more attainable than you think. So we can always talk. But I think, there are between 1 and 5 employees, there isn't a lot that you need. There are just certain, like a lot of the stuff that we've covered today is really kind of where the focus would be. So a lot of times, your office, HR has 2 sides to it. There's the transactional, which is your onboarding, your offboarding. Gusto is by far our most popular payroll system, and HRIS, and sometimes the benefits as well. And so having that piece covered is really typically the most important at the size that you're talking about.
It's great.
Awesome. And Bamboo HR would be the next step up then. That's our team's favorite. Bamboo HR.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's an HRIS, and so that would be kind of your next step up. But I think having that transactional side. So I've been really fortunate my whole career. I've been very early on as that strategic partner as well, to really think about what the business is trying to accomplish, and then how do we accomplish that through everything that we're doing on the employee side. And so fractional service like ours to meet that need at some point. But I would say at 5 employees, most often what you really need is that transactional, just smooth, no distraction, having that onboarding, offboarding process.
Very good, thank you.
But yeah, reach out. I'm happy to talk.
Why don't we take one more question from Joseph? Joseph has his hand raised.
Oh, good. Joseph.
Thank you, Shannon, for being here. With some of the suggestions that you had in your deck, I just wanted to ask, are some of them to be taken literally, or be more correcting mistakes?
Okay. Give me an example of what should be taken literally or not.
Okay, so we have our kickoff July 12th, and all of the people that I've recruited so far have taken big pay cuts and left big companies to join my startup, except for one. And so in some of our pre-launch meetings, there's one gentleman, that I feel is not going to be a great culture fit. And instinctually, I know that I'm right. But I'm wondering if I need a reason before I tell this person he's not going to be a fit for the team.
Yeah, so that's actually a really great question. So, your gut is telling you something, and then it's trying to get some data behind it. And, I think if everybody else on the team thinks that this person is fantastic and you decide to make a change, that could be really detrimental to the morale and the culture. And so if you get a sense that others are sharing your concern, and that, and you're seeing some evidence of that, if there's some behavioral things that you can see, some impact, and you can try to put more data behind your gut. And then if it's something the person can fix, then have the conversation. And if it's behavior, you can focus on behavior. So you may not be able to focus on personality or focus on the way that somebody is thinking, but you can definitely focus on behavior and how they're showing up for the rest of the team. And if there's a negative impact there, just addressing it, and maybe having a candid conversation, just saying, do you feel like this is a good fit for you, and that you belong here. Because it's again, having candid conversations early on is much better than letting things drag on. But again, I mean, I would be concerned about if your feelings are isolated and you take action on that, you may have some issues with the rest of the team.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, thank you. And with that, I think we're kind of at time. I really, on behalf of everyone, really like to thank Shannon for spending a full hour with us, sharing with us all her guidance, all very helpful, very practical advice. And if folks have any questions for her, I know Shannon has had flashed up her email, or if you need her contact information, feel free to send me a note. Be happy to connect you. And there's a contact information. And if you sign on the Eventbrite for this, we'll be sending out the slides to everyone, so you can take it as a reference. And with that, thank you very much, Shannon.
Thank you for having me, Jane. It's been great spending this time with all of you. And please reach out if I can answer any questions or provide any additional help.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks to all for participating, and have a great rest of the week.
All right. Thank you.
Goodbye.